All right, I ask you. Then first I would like a drink. He rubbed his hands and looked at Aten. Water? Grunted Aten. Don't be silly. Don't you be silly. No alcohol today. It would be too easy to get my men drunk. I can't afford to tempt them. The psychologist grumbled wordlessly. He turned to Dermon, impaled him with his sharp eyes, and began. You realize, of course, that the history of civilization on Lagash displays a cyclic character. But I mean cyclic. I know, replied Dermon cautiously, that is the current archaeological theory. Has it been accepted as a fact? Just about. In this last century it's been generally agreed upon. This cyclic character is, or rather was, one of the great mysteries. We've located series of civilizations, 9 of them definitely, and indications of others as well, all of which have reached heights comparable to our own, and all of which, without exception, were destroyed by fire at the very height of their culture. And no one could tell why. All centers of culture were thoroughly gutted by fire, with nothing left behind to give a hint as to the cause. Dermon was following closely. Wasn't there a Stone Age too? Probably, but as yet practically nothing is known of it, except that men of that age were little more than rather intelligent apes. We can forget about that. I see. Go on. There have been explanations of these current catastrophes, all of a more or less fantastic nature. Some say that there are periodic rains of fire, some that Lagash passes through a sun every so often, some even wilder things. But there is one theory quite different from all of these, that has been handed down over a period of centuries. I know, you mean this myth of the stars that the cultists have in their Book of Revelations. Exactly, rejoined Shirin with satisfaction. The cultists said that every 2050 years Lagash entered a huge cave, so that all the suns disappeared, and there came total darkness all over the world. And then, they say, things called stars appeared, which robbed men of their souls and left them unreasoning brutes, so that they destroyed the civilization they themselves had built up. Of course, they mixed all this up with a lot of religio-mystic notions, but that's the central idea. There was a short pause in which Shirin drew a long breath. And now we come to the theory of universal gravitation. He pronounced the phrase so that the capital letters sounded. At that point, Aten turned from the window, snorted loudly, and stalked out of the room. The two stared after him, and Dermon said, "What's wrong?" "Nothing in particular," replied Shirin. Two of the men were due several hours ago and haven't shown up yet. He is terrifically short-handed, of course, because all but the really essential men have gone to the hideout. You don't think the two deserted, do you? Who, Pharaoh and Yemot? Of course not. Still, if they are not back within the hour, things would be a little sticky. He got to his feet silently, and his eyes twinkled. Anyway, as long as Aten is gone. Tiptoeing to the nearest window, he squatted and from the low window box beneath withdrew a bottle of red liquid that gargled suggestively when he shook it. "I thought Atom didn't know about this," he remarked as he trotted back to the table. "Here, we've only got one glass, so, as the guest, you can have it. I will keep the bottle." And he filled the tiny cup with his judicious care. Dermore rose to protest, but Sharon eyed him sternly. "Respect your elders, young man." The newsman seated himself with a look of anguish on his face. "Go ahead then, you old villain." The psychologist Adam's apple wobbled as the bottle opened, and then with a satisfied grunt and a smack of the lips, he began again. "But what do you know about gravitation?" "Nothing except that it is a very recent development, not too well established, and that the math is so hard that only 12 men in Lagash are supposed to understand it." "Tja, nonsense, baloney. I can give you all the essential math in a sentence. The law of universal gravitation states that there exists a cohesive force among all bodies of the universe, such that amount of this force between any two given bodies is proportional to the product of their masses divided by the square of the distance between them. Is that all? That's enough. It took 400 years to develop it." "Why that long? It sounded simple enough, the way you said it." "Because great laws are not divided by flashes of inspiration, whatever you may think. It usually takes the combined work of a world full of scientists over a period of centuries. After Genovese 41 discovered that Lagash rotated about the Sun Alpha rather than vice versa, and that was 400 years ago, astronomers have been working. The complex motions of the six suns were recorded and analyzed and unwoven. Theory after theory was advanced and revived and converted to something else. It was a devil of a job." Dermot nodded thoughtfully and held out his glass for more liquor. Sharon grudgingly allowed a few rabbit drops to leave the bottle. "It was 20 years ago," he continued, after remoistening his own throat, "that it was finally demonstrated that the law of universal gravitation accounted exactly for the orbital motions of the six suns. It was a great triumph." Sharon stood up and walked to the window, still clutching his bottle. "And now we are getting to the point. In the last decade, the motions of Lagash about Alpha were computed according to gravity, and it did not account for the orbit observed, not even when all perturbations due to the other suns were included. Either the law was invalid, or there was another, as yet unknown factor involved." Dermot joined Sharon at the window and gazed out past the wooden slopes to where the spires of Sorrow City gleamed bloodily on the horizon. The newsman felt the tension of uncertainty grow within him as he cast a short glance at Beta. It glowered redly at Zenith, dwarfed and evil. "Go ahead, sir," he said softly. Sharon replied. "Astronomers stumbled about for years. Each proposed a theory more untenable than the one before, until Aten had the inspiration of calling in the cult. The head of the cult, Sor 5, had access to certain data that simplified the problem considerably. Aten set to work on a new track. What if there were another non-luminous planetary body such as Lagash? If there were, it would shine only by reflected light, and if it were composed of bluish rock, as Lagash itself largely is, then the redness of the sky, the eternal blaze of the suns, would make it invisible, drown it out completely. Dermon whistled. What a screwy idea. You think that's screwy? Listen to this. Suppose this body rotated about Lagash at such a distance and in such an orbit and had such a mass that its attraction would exactly account for the deviations of Lagash's orbit from theory. Do you know what would happen? The columnist shook his head. Well, sometimes this body would get in the way of a sun, and Sharon emptied the what remained in the bottle at the draught. And it does, I suppose, said Dermon flatly. Yes, but only one sun lies in its plane of revolution. He jerked a thumb at the shrunken sun above. Beta, and it has been shown that the eclipse will occur only when the arrangement of the suns is such that Beta is alone in its hemisphere and at a maximum distance, at which time the moon is invariable at minimum distance. The eclipse that results with the moon 7 times the apparent diameter of Beta covers all of Lagash and lasts well over half a day, so that no spot on the planet escapes the effects. That eclipse comes once every 2049 years. Dermon's face was drawn into an expressionless mask. And that's my story? The psychologist nodded. That's all of it. First the eclipse, which will start in 3/4 of an hour, then universal darkness, and maybe these mysterious stars, then madness, and then the end of the cycle. He brooded. We had 2 months leeway. We at the observatory, that wasn't enough time to persuade Lagash of the danger. 2 centuries might not have been enough, but our records are at the hideout. And today we photograph the eclipse. The next cycle will start off with the truth. And when the next eclipse comes, mankind will at last be ready for it. Come to think of it, that's part of your story too. A thin wind ruffled the curtains at the windows as Dermon opened it and leaned out. It played coldly with his hair as he stared at the crimson sunlight on his hand. Then he turned his sudden rebellion. What is there in darkness to drive me mad? What is there in darkness to drive me mad? Sharon smiled to himself as he spun the empty liquor bottle with abstracted motions of his hand. Have you ever experienced the darkness, young man? The newsman leaned against the wall and considered. No, can't say I have, but I know what it is. He made vague motions with his fingers and then brightened. Just no light, like in caves. Have you ever been in a cave? In a cave? Of course not. I thought not. I tried last week. Just to see, but I got out in a hurry. I went in until the mouth of the cave was just visible as a blur of light, with black everywhere else. I never thought a person of my weight could run that fast. Dermon's lip curled. Well, if it comes to that, I guess I wouldn't have run if I had been there. The psychologist studied the young man with his annoyed frown. My, don't you talk big. I dare you to draw the curtain. Dermon looked his surprise and said, What for? If we had 4 or 5 suns out there, we might want to cut the light down a bit for comfort. But now we haven't enough light as it is. That's the point. Just draw the curtain, then come here and sit down. All right. Dermon reached for the tasteless string and jerked. The red curtain slid across the white window, the brass rings hissing their way along the crossbar, and a dusk-red shadow clamped down on the room. Dermon's footsteps sounded hollowly in the silence as he made his way to the table, and when they stopped halfway, "I can't see you, sir," he whispered. "Feel your way," ordered Sharing in a strained voice. "But I can't see you, sir." The newsman was breathing harshly. "I can't see a thing. I can't see anything." "What did you expect?" came the grim reply. "Come here and sit down." The footsteps sounded again, waveringly, approaching slowly. There was the sound of someone fumbling with a chair. Dermon's voice came thinly. "Here I am. I feel all right. You like it, do you?" "No, it's pretty awful. The walls seem to be," he paused. "They seem to be closing in on me. I keep wanting to push them away, but I am not going mad. In fact, the feeling isn't as bad as it was." "All right, draw the curtain back again." There were cautious footsteps through the dark, the rustle of the Dermon's body against the curtain as he felt for the tassel, and then the triumphant rush of the curtain slithering back. The red light flooded the room, and with a cry of joy Dermon looked up at the sun. Sharing wiped the moistness of his forehead with the back of a hand and said shakily, "And that was just a dark room." "It can't be stood," said Dermon lightly. "Yes, a dark room can, but were you at the Jungler Centennial Exposition 2 years ago?" "No, it so happens I never got around to it. 6,000 miles was just a bit too much to travel, even for the exposition." "Well, I was there. You remember hearing about the Tunnel of Mystery that broke all records in the amusement area for the first month or so? Anyway?" "Yes, wasn't there some fuss about it?" "Very little. It was hushed up. You see, that Tunnel of Mystery was just a mile-long tunnel, with no lights. You got into a little open car and jolted along through darkness for 15 minutes. It was very popular while it lasted." "Popular?" "Certainly. There is a fascination in being frightened when it's part of a game. A baby is born with 3 instinctive fears: of loud noises, of falling, and of the absence of light. That's why it's considered so funny to jump at someone and shoot boo. That's why it's such funny to ride a roller coaster. And that's why that Tunnel of Mystery started cleaning up. People came out of that darkness shaking, breathless, half dead with fear, but they kept on paying to get in." "Wait a while. I remember now. Some people came out dead, didn't they? There were rumors of that after it shut down." The psychologist snorted. "Bah! 2 or 3 died. That was nothing. They paid off the families of the dead ones and argued the Jungler City Council into forgetting it. After all, they said, if people with weak hearts want to go through the tunnel, it was at their own risk, and besides, it wouldn't happen again. So they put a doctor in the front office and had every customer go through a physical examination before getting into the car. That actually boosted ticket sales." "Well then, but you see, there was something else. People sometimes came out in perfect order, except that they refused to go into buildings, any buildings, including palaces, mansions, apartment houses, tenements, cottages, huts, shacks, linnotos, and tents." Dermon looked shocked. "You mean they refused to come in out of the open? There would they sleep?" "In on the open. They should have forced them inside. Oh, they did, whereupon these people went into violent hysterics and did their best to bat their brains out against the nearest wall. Once you got them inside, you couldn't keep them there without a straitjacket or a heavy dose of tranquilizer. They must have been crazy, which is exactly what they were. One person out of every 10 who went into that tunnel came out that way. They called in the psychologists, and we did the only thing possible. We closed down the exhibit. He spread his hands. What was the matter with these people? Asked Dermot finally. Essentially, the same thing that was the matter with you when you thought the walls of the room were crashing in on you in the dark. There is a psychological term for mankind's instinctive fear of the absence of light. We call it claustrophobia, because the lack of light is always tied up with enclosed places. So that fear of one is fear of the other, you see? And those people of the tunnel consisted of those unfortunates whose mentality did not quite possess the resiliency to overcome the claustrophobia that overtook them in the darkness. 15 minutes without light is a long time. You had only 2 or 3 minutes, and I believe you were fairly upset. The people of the tunnel had what is called a claustrophobic fixation. Their latent fear of darkness and enclosed places had crystallized and become active, and as far as we can tell, permanent. That's what 15 minutes in the dark will do. There was a long silence, and Dermot's forehead wrinkled slowly into a frown. I don't believe it's that bad. You mean you don't want to believe, snapped Sherin. You are afraid to believe. Look out the window. Dermot did so, and the psychologist continued without pausing. Imagine darkness everywhere. No light, as far as you can see. The houses, the trees, the fields, the earth, the sky. Black, and stars thrown in, for all I know, whatever they are. Can you conceive it? Yes, I can, declared Dermot truculently, and Sherin slammed his fist down upon the table in sudden passion. You lie! You can't conceive that! Your brain wasn't built for the conception of any more than it was built for the conception of infinity or of eternity. You can only talk about it. A fraction of the reality upsets you, and when the real thing comes, your brain is going to be presented with the phenomenon outside its limits of comprehension. You will go mad, completely and permanently. There is no question about it. He added sadly, and another couple of millennia of painful struggle comes to nothing. Tomorrow there won't be a city standing unharmed in all Lagash. Dermot recovered parts of his mental equilibrium. That doesn't follow. I still don't see that I can go loony just because there isn't a sun in the sky. But even if I did and everyone else did, how does that harm the cities? Are we going to blow them down? But Sherin was angry too. If you were in darkness, what would you want more than anything else? What would it be that every instinct would call for? Light, damn you, light! Well, and how would you get light? I don't know, said Dermot flatly. What's the only way to get light? Short of a sun? How should I know? They were standing face to face and nose to nose. Sherin said, You burn something, mister. Ever see a forest fire? Ever go camping and cook a stew over a wood fire? Heat isn't the only thing burning wood gives you off. You know, it gives off light, and people know that. And when it's dark, they want light, and they're going to get it. So they burn wood, so they burn whatever they can. They've got to have light, they've got to burn something, and wood isn't handy. So they will burn whatever is nearest. They will have their light, and every center of habitation goes up in flames. Eyes hold each other as thought the whole matter were a personal affair of respective will powers. And then Dermot broke away wordlessly. His breathing was harsh and ragged, and he scarcely noted the sudden hubbub that came from the adjoining room behind the closed door.